Donald Trump said on Truth Social, because of other countries' testing programs, I have instructed the Department of War to start testing our nuclear weapons on an equal basis. That process will begin immediately. Maria Rost Rublee, welcome. So Donald Trump says his motivation behind this is other countries' testing programs. How many countries in the world at the moment are testing nuclear weapons?
None. That's what makes this announcement by Trump so surprising. Now, Russia has recently tested two new nuclear-powered ways to carry nuclear weapons, a nuclear-powered missile and a nuclear-powered underwater drone, both of which are nuclear-capable in terms of capable of carrying nuclear weapons. But the last country to test an actual nuclear weapon in terms of an explosive nuclear weapons test was North Korea in 2017. No other country other than North Korea has tested nuclear weapons in this century. And so Trump's announcement is a bit, it's unnerving, because if the US starts testing, that opens the door to other countries, but it also doesn't make much sense.
Yeah, but so then taking into account what he said in that post, do you expect this is more about testing missiles capable of carrying nuclear payloads, or does it actually seem he's talking about exploding nuclear weapons?
Well, it's unclear, but it doesn't make sense. The U.S. tests its nuclear-capable missiles all the time. I mean, this is something that happens routinely. And so it's not clear what he meant. However, there is reason to be concerned that he is actually restarting the nuclear weapons testing. There have been many people in the second Trump administration who have argued that the U.S. needs to start testing nuclear weapons again. And his appointee for the NSSA, which would oversee nuclear weapons testing, he's an outsider to the nuclear labs, because most experts in the nuclear labs think that restarting nuclear testing would be a big mistake.
And so if this is about exploding nuclear weapons, what do you expect the US approach might be in terms of numbers and where they're set off?
Yes, well, I mean, the U.S. has one main testing ground these days. That's in the Nevada Proving Grounds, which is about 100 kilometers north of Las Vegas. So, and what they would be testing, I mean, this is why it doesn't make much sense. The U.S. has a very stable, reliable, and capable nuclear stockpile. And so they wouldn't want to be testing nuclear weapons that they've already tested. They'd want to be testing nuclear, new modern designs, which, a small but loud voice in the U.S. has said they need to do. And so, they'd have to get those designs ready. They'd have to get containment procedures ready at the Nevada testing grounds. And some people have estimated it would take 12 months, maybe up to 3 years to get the Nevada testing site ready. And, in terms of numbers, unless they're going to be testing already tested designs, they're not going to be testing high numbers anytime soon.
And over the years, what's been the environmental impact of testing even underground?
Oh, the environmental impact of nuclear testing has been pretty horrific. Of course, most nuclear tests to start with were above ground, some were underwater, and it just led to, terrible environmental and human health effects. Then after the Partial Test Ban Treaty was negotiated in the 1960s, they moved to underground testing. But even then, there's been a lot of negative effects because, you have this enormous shock wave, which causes vents and, all sorts of ways for the radionuclides to escape. And it also gets into groundwater. In fact, a recent study showed that they saw leakage into groundwater 30 years after nuclear tests took place.
And so what impact will this have on efforts to limit the production of nuclear weapons and the likelihood of nuclear conflict?
Look, I think it's really important to say that this would actually be a huge gift to China. When you test nuclear weapons, you get a huge amount of data that allows you to design your nuclear weapons more precisely. And the U.S. has had more nuclear tests than all other countries in the world combined. The U.S. has tested over 1,000. China's only had 45 nuclear weapons tests. And so if the U.S. started nuclear tests again, that would open the door to Russia and China. And of course, China would be very likely to jump on that opportunity because, once the U.S. has broken that taboo, then China could, basically conduct tests. They're in the process of modernizing, expanding their own nuclear forces, and they're limited by the data that they've acquired from those 45 tests. So, this would lead to, an even greater expansion and modernization of the Chinese arsenal. And we know that the more nuclear weapons we have, the more likely we are to have accidental launch, potentially terrorists acquire nuclear weapons. That's why the international community, with Australia in the lead, has led this, has basically demanded reduction in nuclear arms. I mean, at one point, we had over 60,000 nuclear weapons in both the US and the Soviet Union at the time. And now we're down to about 12,000 nuclear weapons worldwide. It's still a lot and it's dangerous. But to begin nuclear testing again, it doesn't make any sense. And it would be actually quite helpful to China rather than helpful to the United States.